Yeah, that's good. Okay. Good afternoon, friends. I welcome you back for the for this lecture number 32, which is titled "Decision Support Tools and Dispersion Modeling for Management of Nuclear and Radiological Emergencies." And this I will be following it up from the topics that I discussed in the previous lecture. Um, I would take this lecture in this sequence. First, I will discuss the elements of decision making during an emergency response, where I would emphasize why we need tools, computational tools and technologies for decision making. In that context, you will be able to, I will, try to make you understand in what phase, in what level, through what type of modeling you can better manage accident or manage the response to any eventual no accidents, any accidents if it should happen. And I will also briefly discuss on the dispersion modeling, weather prediction and decision support systems, their architecture, basic things I would just touch upon in this level. I will go in details in the advanced course, in the upcoming advanced course, where I will be discussing in detail on these aspects. And again, I will discuss on the non-radiological consequences and its mitigation, and overall how what is required to keep ourselves poised through testing ourselves in emergency exercises, and what sort of methodologies that we can adapt and do. So in this context, I would say now I will basically discuss on the decision making part, and then technologies and computation tools involved. Yeah. So what is the challenge? What sort of challenge is there? And especially when you want to make decisions in the in the face of any accident, or a release, or a response that is to be implemented in the public domain. What sort of challenge is actually there? I think we should understand that first, and then we will be able to appreciate what sort of tools or supporting models that should be actually employed, and how it should be used, and to what extent it should be used. So we'll be appreciating that better only if you understand what is actually the challenge. So we all know an emergency or an emergency situation brings in a context of uncertainty, as I was yesterday explaining you the various phases of emergency. Please recall that. And once there is an emergency, in the immediate aftermath, or the starting phase of an emergency, you will have very little or no data on actual releases. This I'm talking specifically for any released scenarios, any release accidents happening from a nuclear power plant. There will be actually a little or no data in the initial stage, either to the responders, or you may have to just rely on crude estimates of airborne releases. First, the actual amount what has been released from the plant will not be known actually. Okay, so that's the first thing. And what you will need to handle an emergency, a nuclear emergency, is you should have an estimate of projected dose. What level of dose a public is likely to get. So that also is not, will not be accurate, will not be good enough in the initial stages, where you will have limited informations to calculate this projected dose, and the decision timeframes are very small. And in the initial phase, while these things are lacking, or there is informations are just coming in, or you are understanding the situation, you are in the process of getting the better understanding of the situation, what is actually the release has happened, how much time it is going to happen, to fall to what extent, to how many, still how many hours it will take to mitigate the conditions inside the plant. So all these informations you will be working on, but at the same time you will have to take decisions on the you have to take decisions and implement certain protective actions in the public domain. So in that phase you have to rely on certain tools when the decision timeframes are short, and for that you have to be prepared, and preparation is critical. And what sort of preparation is going to help you in that particular phase of an emergency? So when I call what is the preparation required, there are many aspects, there are many things that will help us in doing that, right from your clarity on roles, clarity on responsibilities, clarity on organization issues. And one of the aspect is, you know, what sort of tools, what sort of technical technologies you are going to use in that in at that moment is going to help you a lot. And again, I'm insisting or emphasizing that when I say decision time frames are short, please don't be taken like it's not in fractions of seconds or in minutes. It is actually in days. Any release, if at all any release has to happen from a nuclear power plant, that is going to only happen from the start of an event. That is only any release is only possible in a time frame of 24 to 48 hours to the minimum. That is, and in the upcoming designs, new designs, the time frames are even going to increase. That is the design philosophy a nuclear power plant generally follows. So the time frames I mean here is not that short, but still we should be prepared for that particular time frame as an emergency overall time frame from days to months. If you are looking at, this is an important time frame. That is the early phase of an accident is an important uh, uh, phase, and then we should handle it better. We are going to discuss how we can handle it better through tools. So the elements of decision making during an emergency response. So what are the things that is going to help us in doing the decision making effectively, or doing the ensures that we are able to instruct or give recommendations to the public authorities that this is the right uh, protective action that is to be implemented in the public domain in the right time. So what are the things that is important? First, you should have criteria for making decisions in the early phase of emergency. So those are called emergency action levels and operation intervention levels. So in the advanced course, we'll be discussing on what are these actually, what are these, or what actually we mean by emergency action levels. Emergency action levels. OILs, operational intervention levels. So, so these are important criterias that is going to be necessary for making these decisions, that is going to support us in making these decisions. So we will be discussing in detail on these emergency action levels and operational intervention levels, etc. And this is the first thing, that a criteria, you should work based on a criteria that helps you make prompt decisions, that keeps you make assess the situation based on certain levels, already predefined levels, so that you decide that certain level of emergency, certain level of situation has escalated to a level, and this level needs a certain level of response. So there is a system in that, and that helps you making the appropriate level. A graded level is also there. And the next thing is the basis and principles for protecting public during different phases of emergency. So again, you should always follow in any decision making, that whatever decisions we make, it ensures that it does more good than harm. So we discussed this as part of the justification principle yesterday in our yesterday's class, and today I would not be getting into the details of it again, but then there is also an essential element of a decision making during an emergency response. And then you need an effective and coordinated operational framework. So this is an essential part of response, that you have to have a well-tuned response framework that is well coordinated as well. So this one has to establish for this, ensure that the decisions are made properly. And next is the robust tools softwares in assisting the decision making process. So there we call this DSS, that is decision support system. You should evolve a decision support system where it actually helps you technologically in predicting many things. You should use softwares to predict weather, predict what is the likely weather condition that is likely going to be there in the next few hours or the next day. If at all there is going to be an extended release, this is a very critical information that will aid us to say what are the areas in the public domain one can focus on. This is not only for nuclear power plant emergencies. This weather prediction is actually effectively used in managing cyclones, and that is where you make when you have a good prediction, we all know that the situation is managed better. The prediction, the handling of the situation is as good as the prediction is. So when you know the exact track of the cyclone, of course it depends upon the cyclone, characteristics of the cyclone, how steady or how it is moving, how frequent it is changing, and there is challenge for the softwares, weather prediction models to predict dynamic situation rather than a cyclone that is quite steady and then moving in a fixed path. So that is a challenge. And then I think today we have a good softwares, good predictions of weather. So likewise, in nuclear power plant also, this weather prediction is going to help us in assist us in predicting or identifying what are the areas that can be affected in the next few hours, so that I can take prior actions, or I can prepare myself to send teams to distribute tablets, to ask them to stay indoors if at all the wind is going to be there in that direction in the particular village. So that is going to be important. So weather prediction is going to be important. And a decision making tool, when I say it is an amalgamation of many things, not just the weather prediction. The first thing I said, the source, the amount of release that has happened, that should also be part of a decision making system. So I will later in this lecture, I'll show you what is the typically what a decision making system will have. What are the tools? What are the models the decision making system will have? Okay, so this is an important aspect. And Another aspect, important aspect of decision making is that capability to reassess and modify the strategy recommendations with taking account of prevailing conditions and challenges in implementation. What what do we mean by this? You know, when you see uh, any emergency, it is going to, the situation is going to be dynamic and it is going to go throw challenges. Okay. And you have to have strategies and the tools that can actually factor in the actual conditions, actual, weather, prediction is one and the actual conditions is different. So you have to have a strategy and tools that can factor in the actual prevailing conditions, and then modify any recommendations, modify any approach in protection that is necessary. That capability is very very essential, and that is also will be assisted by tools. And you'll and there is one more challenge. What it is? It is when you recommend when you recommend public authorities to implement certain protective actions, you give identifier blocking in this area in this much short time, and the public authority says that yeah, I normally I should be able to do, but at this moment there is flooding scenarios also there, and then the roads are affected. Probably I'm going to take extra time to reach that places. Probably what else I can do? So in that situation, what else we should actually listen to the challenges in implementing a protective action, and then reassess and modify, and we should implement immediately. We should advise, or we should be able to advise additional or appropriate protective action. Maybe you can say that, okay, if you're going to take time in reaching that place, okay, better, okay, you also advise them to stay indoors as long as possible, and ensure at least few authorities reaches there, and then these stay indoors is at least implemented effectively there, and that should also save quite an amount of doses, and that should be enough. And then by the time you are able to do the earlier implemented protective actions. So this capability of modifying and reassessing is an important aspect of decision making, and this is also is going to be supported by tools also. Okay, so majorly I will briefly discuss today on the framework very shortly, and majorly I will discuss on the DSS part. And the process of emergency response, as I said, you should always, we should be clear about what is the basically what could be the process, so that where you are going to apply the tools. Okay, so there is going to be a plan condition, which where the plant is undergoing a challenging condition, probably event has happened, and then mitigations are happening, and then still it's a situation escalating, and if it is likely to escalate, and then releases are happening or predicted to happen, then what you do is that you actually use pre-operational criteria, observables, and preset action levels that can actually uh, give you an idea about what this plant condition is. you know what is the level of this plant condition. In the advanced course, we will actually in detail discuss about the levels of emergency. Okay, generally we call this as class, emergency class. Okay, so there's a grading in doing our job. Okay, so you don't do a response that is same response that is for all situations. So you always need to grade your response. So in that context, you need a classification system that says you what level of emergency it is, and from that itself you start giving the appropriate level of protection. So that is important. So we will discuss in the advanced course. And here in the then you actually declare an emergency. you know you'll understand, declaring an emergency, it could be a plant emergency, it could be a site emergency, it could be an off-site emergency, where off-site, I mean there is a release of the of to the public domain. So that is, so these things you will learn in the advanced course. and then there is going to be a protective action that is implemented. Okay, so in doing this, in this process, you will have to make decisions here in this area, where after declaration, what is the protective action that is to be recommended? Okay, so here we are going to apply the process of decision support systems here. And briefly coming to the institutional framework, which I said, that, which is also an important element of decision making. That is, you need to have a very clear institutional framework for management of emergency. And this is a typical institutional framework for management of nuclear emergencies, any emergencies arising from a nuclear power plant in India. So this is the national, institutional framework. And I have, for your clarity, I've put it in three levels. One is the national level, state level, and local level. And we all know a disaster is managed better when the local level is empowered. And this is the basic fundamental theme. I think Mishra ji has taught us that in the current changed philosophy of disaster management, empowering the local community or the local level for managing any disasters is the main theme. And so any disasters have to be managed locally. And if the local community at the local level is well equipped, then the disasters are managed effectively. Okay. So if needed only, we, the supports and from the state and center, and then depending upon the type of emergencies, the response framework changes. So for nuclear emergency, there is a response framework. That is an institutional framework for actually preparedness and response. In this case, you see in the national level, I would urge you to just see this into two parts. Basically, one is the technical domain and this implementation or execution. Okay. So here, when you look at this, in the technical domain, you have Department of Atomic Energy. That is the nodal department for technical aspects. And you have under the department, you have DAE has constituted a crisis management group, DAE, to coordinate and execute various activities as part of disaster management, and which is basically takes care of technical aspects as part of technical support to various organizations and to the various levels. And for NPPs, you have a national, NPCIL, and you also have DAE, RERD, that is Radiation Emergency Response Director. So, which at the national level, and then you have AERB, which actually prescribes the required requirements and guidance and ensures preparedness of the licensee and monitoring of response as well. And this is the national agencies that are clearly identified with certain roles and responsibilities. And at the national level, in the execution level and the executive level, you say MHA is the nodal ministry for overall coordination of managing any disasters. And in this case also, it is the case. And you have NDRF, under MHA. And then you have, I think SDRF, I forgot to mention here. You will have SDRF in the state level as well. And state government, state executive committee, and then the responsible officer. And you have NDMA, which actually ensures the preparedness for offsite emergency response at all levels. They have SDMAs and DDMAs at various, state and local levels. So NDMA is the apex body that brings in the policies and guidelines for management of disaster management. So that you have already learned in the previous lectures. So for nuclear emergency, when you look at the local level, you see there is going to be a site emergency director. I was teaching you about different phases of emergency. There is an early phase and here you see intermediate phase. So depending upon the phase which we are in, the responsibilities are clearly identified. In the early phase, the site emergency director, that is the plant authorities, are responsible in advising the public authority. That is the responsible, we call that RO or IC as per the incident response system of NDMA, IRS system. And the responsible officer will be advised or will be recommended to implement certain protective action in accordance to the actual conditions, the plan. The plan conditions will actually give what is the need, what level of protection is actually needed in the public domain. So that recommendation will be given by either the site emergency director. He will give the recommendation in the early phase, and once in the intermediate phase, we have yesterday discussed on this. So in the intermediate phase, DAE's RERD will actually recommend what is the level of protection that is to be taken in the public domain. So this way, the structure is very clearly defined, and then this also takes cognizance of what is the resources of each of these agencies are, what are their capabilities, what is appropriate for each of these agencies. So accordingly, in the local level, it is very clearly identified, and this response framework is tested in emergencies as well. You know, in it, so I will talk about how this response is effectively tested, not just tested, effectively tested, what is needed for an effective testing in the last couple of slides. And this is an institutional framework that is actually put in place so that decisions are made and implemented promptly in an emergency. Okay. So one more piece of learning, probably a piece of slide where we can go back and recollect what we have learned from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident and its response. Okay, so experience from Fukushima accident and emergency has shown that a response action, although intended to mitigate the consequence on the public, it can do more harm than good. Okay, if not optimized and justified. Again, I'm going to insist on this. I've taught you, in the previous lecture also, what do we mean by doing more good than harm? So it is an important aspect, and this is where we need to employ tools so that we ensure that we always implement a protective action that actually does more good than harm. So that is where we need to take support of technologies and tools. And it also conveyed is that decision making is the core of emergency management. Okay, and it emphasized on the understanding and knowledge of plant conditions and parameters in the early phase. See, in the early phase of any accident, your understanding of the plant, your understanding of what is actually happening in the plant and what level of escalation is required is essentially needed so that you actually implement the right, needed, or appropriate protective actions. So this understanding of plant conditions and parameters in that stage is very important. And timely availability of meteorological conditions. See, so we need to meteorology conditions are always monitored, and then the current met data is always available from in each sites. But we also need meteorology, informations on likely meteorological conditions, for the next few hours to up to a maximum of a day or two, so that we are prepared. Okay, and monitoring data in subsequent phases. The subsequent phases, the availability of monitoring data, I think this is being very, I think effectively this can be done, because in the later phases, time availability, time is not a constraint. Probably you can pull in resources and do the effective, comprehensive monitoring of the actual, fallout, and then you can actually decide what is the level of protection is required. Okay. So, and you will have to have protective action strategies and implementation in different phases. Okay, so the strategies are going to be different for different phases. In the early immediate aftermath of an accident, your strategy is going to be different, because the your strategy will be to implement the urgent protective actions that is needed to reduce the doses. And in the later phases, your strategy is going to reduce the further stochastic effect or further improve the situation better. So your protection strategy is going to be in accordance to the phases. Okay. So these are the important aspects that we learned from Fukushima accident, and how we can ensure that we are addressing these gaps in our preparedness. So now I come into the topic of dispersion modeling. Okay, so as I think I have taken you through quite elaborately on why a dispersion modeling is required, in what context a dispersion modeling is going to help us in making decisions. Okay, because of the time frames, because of the unknowns, because of the need for future predictions. Okay, so these are aspects that will actually that will need support of modeling, and one is the dispersion modeling. So I'm going to take you to the basic atmospheric process. Okay, atmospheric process where you will have a stack. Of course, this just for the understanding purpose. You should assume that a release is happening from a stack. Okay, or release is happening from a height, some height. Okay, and you have a atmospheric condition, that is whether a wind is blowing, or a wind from a direction, and how the how the diffusion takes place, how if how the the radionuclides are transported through various phenomena. Okay, so in this process you will say the wind is in this direction, and there is going to be a plume. Generally this is called the we call this as a plume. And how the in the immediate aftermath, it just travels like this, and then there is a diffusion process, and it is transported through a distance, for a distance, and then by nature, there are going to be eddies at different levels because of the various atmospheric levels and inversion levels. And here you also will see if there is going to be rain, and then there is also going to be a washout phenomena, rain washout phenomena. Okay, so the radionuclides that are being carried will actually get deposited quite nearer because of this washout phenomena, or it can either travel for a longer distance depending upon the conditions, depending upon the weather conditions. Okay, either depending upon the wind parameters as well, whether it is a steady wind conditions or it is an unsteady wind conditions. I think we will also get into the depth of this in the subsequent advanced lecture. Okay, but then at the moment you should understand as a basic level that this is how it is transported, this is how a radionuclide is transported through a plume. Okay, and you have the certain for the calculations of for estimating the things, there are certain calculations. For making certain calculations, you have this stack height and plume rise. See, there's going to be a plume, and this is the plume rise. Okay, this is the rise of this is the height the plume has risen, and this is the path. Okay, and effective stack height will is that it is a summation of both, so that is called, we have this effective stack height. So in an atmospheric dispersion, first what you do is we calculate the air concentration, okay? That is pollutant concentration profiles, how much pollutant is actually in the concentration, the air, okay? So the air concentration you actually have to estimate, okay? So we generally use a model called Gaussian plume model, okay? Is used for estimating this, and in that the air concentration is actually estimated, high values actually estimated is by an expression, okay, where you have various parameters that is influenced by various parameters, right from the radionuclide emission rate, okay, that is Q, and wind speed diluting the plume, okay, the wind speed diluting the plume, it is going to be here in this level. So these you should understand what are the aspects that actually influences the calculation of air concentration, okay? So once you understand these variables, okay, wind speed diluting the plume and standard deviation of concentration in the horizontal direction, okay? So now you will have a three-dimensional deviations, okay, and there you will see the horizontal direction as well as the vertical direction, okay, the standard deviation of concentration in both, okay. So those parameters you will have to estimate, and downwind distance in the direction of mean wind, okay. So the downwind distance, now what is to what distance it is actually traveling, the wind is traveling, the downwind distance is important, and distance in horizontal plane perpendicular to the x-axis, that is also is a variable, and height of receptor and effective release height of plume center line, okay. So it is all explained here. Effective release of plume, this plume center line. See, this is a plume center line. Okay, so the plume will have a profile like this. The a plume profile will be like this, and you will have see the profiles of the plume will be. I'm sorry. The profiles of the plume will be in two different ways. It can be in this in these ways, and the plume center line is actually indicated like this, okay, the plume center line. So these are the parameters that are necessary for estimating the air concentration using a Gaussian plume model, okay. So interested participants can further get into these models and then understand the ideas, and then the calculation methodologies of estimating how an air concentration can be estimated, okay. And then you also will be needed to estimate a time integrated concentration, okay, where we see the system coordinates are there. There is going to be a source becquerel per second, okay. There is going to be a source from here, and there is going to be a wind here, okay, which we have already seen. And this is the plume, okay. This is an elaborated again the concentration, center line concentration. Whatever we have seen here, okay, it is just an expansion of that. Sorry, expansion of that, this center line concentration at P. And now you will have to estimate a time integrated concentration. Okay, a time integrated concentration will give you the parameter of what is actually the concentration estimation, that is the value that is needed for estimating the doses. Okay, dose calculations, it is important. And next, in estimating the dose after a dispersion, after you understand how much is the concentration in the air, how much have actually traveled, and what is the actual time integrated concentration available, then you will have to estimate the dose to the public based on the concentration of radionuclides that has in a particular location that has happened because of the dispersion of the radionuclides. Now we will have to estimate the doses. Okay, so as part of the atmospheric dose calculation, you need to understand various aspects of how the exposure pathways are going to be. That is atmospheric route and aquatic route. First, broad classify. You should classify. You can classify it in that. In that, a person can receive a dose in the plume from the plume, uh, because when the radionuclides are in the plume, it can give doses to the to an individual. And in an inhalation dose, that is, if you inhale certain amount of radionuclides through the inhalation, so because of the inhalation, you will have a dose, an individual will receive doses, and the ground shine dose and ingestion dose. Okay, ground shine is basically because of the ground deposits on the ground, and how much dose you're getting from the deposits that are lying in the ground. And the ingestion, I'm just discussing at the very basic level here. Okay, and the ingestion dose, that is contaminated foodstuffs. Okay, ingestion by way of intake, if you are consuming contaminated food, and because of that, how much exposure you are getting, a dose you are getting, is basically estimated through the ingestion pathway. Okay, so these are the various atmospheric pathways, that atmospheric route pathways, that a person, an individual, can get a dose. In the ingestion dose, I have already written that when you eat leafy vegetables and products, then because of milk, because milk and meat intake, due to milk and meat, in that all these food items, if it is contaminated, then an individual will get a certain amount of dose, and then you estimate. See, this is to comprehensively estimate how much dose the individual will actually receive, or may receive in an emergency condition. So you need to understand these pathways, and then you calculate. Okay, and in the aquatic route, consumption of contaminated water for drinking and cooking. Okay, an ingestion of contaminated fish, irrigation of plants with contaminated surface water. Okay, and recreational activity like swimming, surfing in contaminated water. I mean, surfing is probably, if at all, if anybody is venturing into seas that is contaminated, so that's surfing part. And then water which leads to external exposures. Okay, so the aspect of aquatic route, the pathway exposure pathways due to aquatic route is also has to be clearly understood. And uh, for dose estimation, okay, in accident conditions, okay, this aquatic route is not going to be that critical. See, these are general exposure pathways you take, in estimating the dose to any individual. Okay, but in the accident condition, the contribution immediately contribution from the aquatic route is going to be very minimal. And for sake of quick estimation, and what is only required to do in the emergency, we can save time in estimating the dose by not calculating the aquatic route. Okay, and aquatic route can be excluded during dose assessment in accident conditions. Okay, so a typical scheme of decision support system. So now you have seen that there is going to be dispersion modeling using a Gaussian plume. A dispersion atmospheric process is there, and then a dispersion modeling is necessary. And you also know the weather is also an important parameter. So putting all together, and the source term is also important. Putting all together, how a typical decision making system framework will look like. Okay, see, so let us see it in the very primitive level of inputs and output, and there is going to be a processing. Okay, for any tool, this is the basic architecture. And okay, and as part of the input, see, processing, what we see, radiological plume dispersion and forecast. And then we also have certain process to additional information for decision making. I will come to this a little later. Okay, what the segment is. So as part of dispersion calculation, one of the important input is weather forecasting. Okay, weather forecasting is important. Okay, there we use WRF models, weather research forecast models. Okay, for forecasting the weather conditions, meteorological conditions. So that is one of the input that goes into the dispersion modeling. And for calculating the air concentrations and air concentration, and then so we want the other input that goes into the dispersion calculation is the accident analysis and source term models. Okay, so here I was, if you recall in my in the first couple of slides, I was telling that every different accident condition will have a different level of degradation in the plant condition, right? So not every no, not all accidents will release a certain same amount, right? So you will have the release from the plant, that is the radionuclide that is being released from the plant will be different for different accident conditions. Okay, so this we call the source term. Okay, the source term that is coming out of the plant that is being released into the atmosphere is also one of the input, and that is generally we estimate using various accident analysis tools, and that comes in as one of the input here. Okay, so then you see the radionuclide plume dispersion forecast. Okay, so by having these inputs, now you do a dispersion calculation using various models. I'll also give the what are the various models used in this dispersion calculations, just for the information at this stage. Interested participants can actually get into these models. I'll give various reference for in-depth reading also. So here you do a radio dispersion calculations, and then you also use data of where is the village centers, where are the primary health centers are there, where are the sheltering points are there. Okay, so as actually in implementing a decision, you need to have a detailed understanding of the total resources, total conditions of the complete area, how much population is there in the particular villages. Okay, and what are the infrastructures available, what are the road networks available. So these data are also important, and that also becomes a part, and this is actually used in the processing part. Okay, so processing, you use a dispersion modeling, and then you get the doses, and depending upon the particular village the GIS, that is geological information system data, then you take your decisions accordingly. I will briefly give you a picture about how it actually looks like, so that you can appreciate, like when you use the model, how it helps you. Okay, and then the output is going to be dose projections, how much dose is going to, how the individuals in a particular area in a village is how much dose they're going to get, and accordingly what are the protective actions that is necessary. Okay, so finally we are interested in what is the dose that is likely to that public are likely to receive, and what is the necessary protective actions to ensure that you mitigate the consequence, you bring the you ensure that those are under the targeted reference levels. So before getting into this, yeah, so this is the slide I was telling you. There is going to be a weather forecast, right? And when you do a weather forecast, so now you can create domain for the complete, the area of interest, the total area of interest, or a very small area of interest, and then you create domains, and then estimate the weather conditions, not just the current weather conditions, and what is going to be there in the next, days, in the next 2 3 4 days. Okay, depending upon the calculation methodology, you will have the accuracies will be different, and then one can estimate these weather data. Okay, and then when a release is going to happen, you see, when a release is going to happen, Oops, it's not playing. Okay, it's supposed to be an animation. Okay, so see, when this is a release, this is a point, and there's an NBP here, and a release, if at all there is going to be a release, and the wind direction is actually from here, and you see, based on dispersion calculations, okay, so what you see is that how the radionuclide is getting dispersed, to what distance it is getting dispersed, okay, and so this will give you, this is not the current weather conditions. This will use, the next hourly weather data is also used. The predicted hourly weather data is also used here. And accordingly, what are the likely areas that is getting affected is identified. Okay. So now, based on the weather data, you make a dispersion calculations, and you have already given an input of source term. Okay, that is also given here, and then you have estimated the doses. Okay, and then now you see here the protective measures. For example, if you want to implement a particular in an area, okay, a certain protective actions. Now you can see, what village wise data are available. Okay, what is the closest village available near the plant? Okay, and what are the doses? So these are the color, the color is the grading of doses. Okay, you will see the high doses nearby the plants. Okay, and in the next village boundaries are available, and each village what are the likely dose. Okay, and mostly predominantly these are the villages that are getting higher level of doses. Okay, and the district authorities will be concentrating immediate in the villages immediately close to the plant, that is this the pink one, and subsequently on the villages in the yellow grade, and then the subsequent actions to be implemented in the villages that are having certain level of doses. Okay, so you have such a depth of informations, which village to what extent, and when you look at this, each of this village, you will have the population data in each of the villages, where the public primary health centers are there, from where the tablets have to be picked, and what are the road network for these villages to reach these villages, and every details you have to have as part of your decision making. So this way, this architecture actually helps you in making a decision, appropriate decision, in by using a predicted, by using the current wind directions, and as well as the future, what is the likely condition that is going to be there in the next couple of hours. Okay, so this way a decision making tool is necessary to aid us in making the appropriate direction. So the regulations, clearly emphasizes that the appropriate agencies, the utility and other agencies should have tools to manage emergency conditions, manage disaster as part of emergency management. And I will go back a couple of sites, and I'm going to just give you a flavor about some of the atmospheric dispersion modeling tools widely used. Okay, this is for readers who specifically wanted to know about certain, various models, atmospheric dispersion models, for their further reading. And depending upon the interest, we will, discuss in the subsequent, advanced courses. So here, there is going to be a very widely used flex part model. Okay, flexible particle dispersion model. Okay, so in the first thing I discussed about the Gaussian plume model. Okay, and here you see the flex part model. This is a widely used model, as now we have enough computational capabilities, and this is quite little advanced than the Gaussian plume models and then the puff models. Okay, so this is one of the good flex part model that is used for dispersion modeling. And for further reading, you can look into this author, and then journal reference, where you can have more detailed reading for. Okay, And regional transport, atmospheric transport model, speedy system for prediction of environmental emergency dose information. So all this, there are certain tools, generic tools that are available, and there are certain tools developed by certain agencies, for their own, handling of emergencies, and that has become a universal tool as well. That is widely acceptable tool as well. Okay, and one such is the worldwide speedy. Okay, which the Speedy was actually further customized and then further developed for a worldwide application. That is, you can read in read about this in this journal paper. And the other is there's also a basic model, that is RIMPUF model. You can look into it. And there are hybrid single particle Lagrangian integrated trajectory models, okay, and RODOS, that is dispersion dose estimation models, and atmospheric dispersion modeling system, ADMS, and hotspot. Hotspot is a tool that uses a Gaussian plume model. Okay, so these are the tool's name is hotspot, and that uses a Gaussian plume model. Okay, so these are some of the tools that are widely used in various countries and various by agencies. And so any interested participant who are interested in-depth reading can look into these references. And okay, so so this is about the dispersion modeling we have discussed today. Okay, and before I close the today's lecture, I would also emphasize on two important aspects as well, as part of overall addressing the overall management of management of nuclear emergencies. In this context, consideration to non-nuclear consequences, that is non-radiological consequences as part of decision making, is an essential aspect. Okay, because this is a learning that we have learned from the past disasters. Okay, discussions on the past experience, emergency response of Fukushima accidents have repeatedly indicated that our capability to address the non-radiological consequence have to be equally emphasized on. Okay, so while making decisions, we need to look at certain aspects, that loss of life estimates, if any, due to implementation of a particular protective actions. When we are implementing a protective action, we should at least have an idea: is there a threat to life because of implementing certain action? In Fukushima, for example, like when the decision of implementing evacuation was made, what happened was that elderly people who were hospitalized were evacuated, shifted, not once, but a couple of times, multiple times, because the wind direction was changing, and they moved to one direction, and then the wind was moving to the other direction again, and so they have to do multiple evacuations. And in that course of time, elderly people, because due to the loss of support, hospital support, ventilation support, critical medical support, lot of people have lost their life. Okay, that is because they, while implementing a action that was intended to reduce a estimated consequence, that consequence was not life threatening. Okay, it was a consequence of a few millisieverts, millisieverts to range of 50 to 100 millisieverts, and you get around 6 to 8, 10 millisieverts in a CT scan. We all know that. Okay, so while trying to save doses of that level, or a little higher level, lot of people have lost their lives. So loss of life estimates while implementing any protective actions, if at all, if it is there, has to be taken into the consideration. Okay, expected number of injuries due to the implementation of different protective action, and also the economic consequence and feasibilities of protective actions. That is mass restriction of certain, when you decide on implementing certain protective action, you should also look at the feasibility of implementation. Okay, So that is when mass restriction of certain essential foods, if you are if you are trying to implement such a protective action, we should also look into the feasibility, cost of mobilization of large-scale transportations for evacuations. These economic consequences and its impact have needs to be taken into consideration. Okay, as part of non-radiological consequences. So this is an essential part that I would like the participants to take back, and then. Although I'm discussing this aspect as part of the last couple of slides, it is an important aspect, that is emergency exercises and methodologies for testing the preparedness. Okay, so we all know how important it is to keep ourselves prepared always, although the eventual the emergencies, the disasters are at least the nuclear emergency, the likelihood of any nuclear emergency is quite low. We should always be prepared anyway. And in this context, given a scenario that the likelihood is very less, and then and still we need to be prepared. So in this context, an effective emergency exercise methodology and a framework is very essential to keep ourselves prepared. Okay, so as part of testing the preparedness, exercises are important, and in that exercise process, emphasis on decision making, command control functions, and field actions should be the main focus. Okay, and you should also have a framework for evaluation of these exercises against a pre-established objective. Okay, so when you conduct an exercise, you should have a methodology to evaluate whether how good my preparedness was against using a pre-established objectives. Okay, certain time that there can be many response time objectives. You can check during an exercise whether you were able to meet these response time objectives, or how good you were, or how good our responses where, or what is the need, what is to be improved as part of preparedness. And this holistically is important for a continual improvement in our response capability. Okay, so the emergency exercise methodologies are an important part in the overall management of management of nuclear and radiologic emergencies, for that matter any disaster management. Okay, and especially when it comes to nuclear emergencies, because I've the context what I said, because of the very unlikely scenarios, the likelihood of any such scenarios is going to be very less, but still how do you ensure that you are prepared for the best? So that is the challenge. And then the exercise framework is targeted to ensure certain part of decision making, command control functions. Okay, so that is going to be the focus. Okay, so this is very an essential part that I wanted to emphasize and then convey for the participants. Okay, so with this, I would just summarize what we have addressed, what we have discussed. Probably because of this nature of the course, I didn't get the opportunity to interact and discuss. So I would just say what have conveyed to the participants. I'll like to recap on that. So we did went through or discussed the planning basis. Okay, the hazard assessment, which is the very fundamental planning basis for any disaster management, not just for nuclear and radiological emergency. That hazard assessment is the fundamental basis for putting a fundamental response framework, a preparedness framework, what level of arrangements, resources are required. So everything comes from hazard assessment that we have discussed, and radiological principles based on which your protection strategy are to be identified and implemented, and the phases following an accident, that is also essential, that because your protection strategy is going to be in accordance to the phases of an emergency. Okay, where we discussed that in the early phase you will have a different context, and in the intermediate phase you will have a different context. So accordingly your strategy has to be there. And we also went through the regulatory requirement, the framework of regulatory requirements and guidelines, where the regulatory requirements are presented in a general in three different basic grouping. There is general functional requirements and the requirements for infrastructure. And we discussed today in today's class, we discussed on the elements of decision making and how decision making is very important and where it matters, why it matters, the timelines, what is the timelines that are necessary, and how tools are necessary to support the decision-making process. And we also discuss the non-religious consequences. And throughout, I think I've made a reflection of what the past emergency, nuclear emergencies, and conditions have what lessons we learned from those, and how we are factoring in our framework, in the regulatory framework, in the preparedness and response framework, and how that is to be taken care if in managing any future emergencies. Okay, so this overall, I think that's the thing we have discussed in the last two lectures, and I'm really happy that I've got this opportunity to share these principles and these fundamentals of managing a nuclear and radiological emergencies. And thank you for your patient listening through the web media, and I wish all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you once again. Thank you. So see, I mean, please send if you have any doubts. Please difference between. Actually, that is one question. Good. What is the difference between emergency action levels and OALs? Very nice question. I think we will anyway be discussing in the advanced course. Basically, the EALs are nothing but emergency action levels that are planned conditions. Okay, planned conditions. The conditions that are that you see during an emergency, during an evolving situation in the plant, observables, what you see in the plant, pressure, temperature of the plant, what is the level of degradation in a system, how do you identify a failure in a design system. So those are pre-identified action levels, emergency action levels. Okay, so that is emergency action level. In the initial stage, you make decisions based on emergency action levels. Okay, and when it comes to operational intervention levels, okay, these are levels of levels after you use operational intervention levels after the releases are in the next stage. Okay, where the releases are almost completed, stopped, and then you do field monitoring. Okay, so you do a monitoring at a ground level, and you see a field rate. Okay, then these, and you take actions based on the rate. Okay, for example, few thousand microsieverts per hour. Okay, so that is it's a field rate, field there. Okay, based on ground monitoring. So now there are certain identified actions for each levels, that is ground monitoring. If the ground monitoring is at this level, you implement certain actions. Okay, so these are operation intervention levels used after field monitoring, after monitoring of foodstuffs, after monitoring of physical monitoring, by skin monitoring. So these are action levels based on monitoring. Okay, so intervention levels. There are seven operation intervention levels that are identified. I think in the next advanced course, I'm happy that this question is put, and I will explain you in detail about the EALs and OALs in the advanced course. Yeah, thank you.
What is it? What is
What is?
C
What is NCMR?
Display.
Okay. This is National Center for Medium and Weather Research models. Okay, so we actually get this data from NCMRWF. Okay, so I will so I will send you the actual details of when you do a WRF modeling. Okay, so you actually can have get the mesoscale basic model basic weather data from this, and then you take it into your own WRF model. Okay, so that is where I have mentioned that in a short form. You can download this data from there, and then you can use it for your. I can share the link with you. What is exactly that? Yeah. Any other questions? NPP, okay, that's nuclear power plant. Sorry for that's a term we use for nuclear power plants. Okay, nuclear power plants. Nice to note that there are many attentive participants, and yeah, please, if there are any more questions, please put mention those on the chat box. And you can also tell us what you want to learn, probably any specific thing that you want to learn in the advanced course. Just tell us that I would like to learn a little bit more on these aspects. Probably we will try to address those as well. Yeah. Yeah, so that is so one can see at the National Center for medium range weather forecast data, as I was just explaining the previous doubts. So one can go and look into these websites, and then they can understand what sort of models they use for weather prediction models, which actually is one of the input for any dispersion modeling or any calculations that you do for preparedness in managing an emergency from any releases, right? From chemical releases also you can use, and this in this case it is the release of radionuclides from a nuclear power plant. Yeah. Any more doubts? No. Anything else? Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.